I'm Nintendo.
And I'm Sega. This is Console Wars! And this death clock says I'll live to be 75. Looks like I won't be able to see the 80s again. What are you doing?
Just trying to count all this change.
Okay, but why?
Heard about all the robberies in our neighborhood lately? We need a security system, and all this change is gonna help.
Look at you, falling right into their hands. Society pumps a little bit of fear into you, and your immediate reaction is to spend.
But this is a real threat. Our neighbors are getting robbed.
Okay then, but we don't need to be spending ridiculous amounts of money.
We don't?
Don't you remember a movie about burglars called Home Alone?
I don't see what that has to do with anything.
Let me show you. See this bunch of Batmobiles? It's not just cars. These are devices that'll make a burglar fall and probably break his neck. And over here, this isn't just a can of paint and a dog leash. No, it's a mini wrecking ball for burglars' faces. And over here, this isn't just a pile of bricks. It's just a pile of bricks, right? That's what he did in the second movie. He just kind of threw them from the rooftop.
Yeah, they got pretty lazy in that second movie.
Almost killed those guys.
He should be in jail for attempted murder.
Dark stuff. Anyways, we don't need no fancy security system. We have the materials. We can do this ourselves.
This is our house. We have to defend it. Alright, I think it's all set up. Now what?
We wait.
I think it's the burglar.
Quick, in there. Sweet! I found all these toy cars.
Those are Batmobiles, you fool!
He's stealing the pumpkin spice.
Huh. I love this beer. Why do people keep stealing the pumpkin spice? We've got to do something. I've got it.
Hey, burglar.
Don't worry, man, I got him. Eat brick. Well, that did not work.
No, that wasn't like Home Alone at all.
Yeah, it's more like Home Alone the video game.
Oh yeah, that game was awful for Sega Genesis.
No, it was worse for the Super Nintendo.
Let's compare.
The worst Home Alone.
Home Alone is a 1990 Christmas comedy film. Despite mixed reviews, it became one of the highest-grossing comedy films of all time. This success led to sequels, TV films, toys, and of course, video games. There were many Home Alone games for Nintendo, Game Boy, Game Gear, the computer, Master System, but the games we're looking at today were the Super Nintendo game developed by Imagineering Inc. and the Sega Genesis game developed by Brian A. Rice Inc. Two very different takes on Home Alone. Which one was worse? Let's find out.
Sega Genesis game definitely has worse graphics.
The characters don't look that great in my game. You can tell who's who, but they barely have faces. The levels are pretty generic. They all look about the same, except for one house that looks like it's from the future. The outside looks pretty plain too, with many trees and a lot of snow. It's easy to lose your place out there since everything looks the same. Not a great looking game.
That's nothing. The Super Nintendo's graphics are way worse.
Everything looks bad in my game. Look at these characters. They barely look like they did in the movie. First off, why is Kevin wearing a white sweater? He wore a red one when he faced the burglars in the movie. He's even wearing the red one on the cover of the game. And look at Harry and Marv. I didn't even realize that Harry was in the game because he looks so bad. And these levels awful design. Awful use of color. My game definitely looks worse.
Okay, but we haven't even talked about the character animations yet.
Choppy, choppy, choppy. Look how stiff everyone moves on Sega. And Kevin moving on his sled looks like a joke.
You want bad animations? Look at this Super Nintendo game.
The enemies in this game have horrible character animations. Look how pathetic things get when they take a hit. And Kevin putting items in a safe? Just wow.
I don't know, I still think my game looks worse.
At least your game looks like the movie.
A quick look at the Sega game, and yeah, you can see the movie. You even have some locations from the movie. Throw in some extra elements, and the Sega game doesn't look too bad. The Super Nintendo game, on the other hand, is a collection of random enemies, set pieces, and locations. It barely looks like the movie. It's like everything was thrown in last minute to get this game out to cash in on the franchise. The Sega Genesis game actually tried and looks better, with horrible graphics and character animations to match. Worst graphics goes to Super Nintendo.
The presentation on the Super Nintendo is way worse.
Look at the cutscenes. These horribly pixelated screenshots from the movie. What is this, the regular Nintendo? Then they put in speech bubbles to tell the story. It's like some of the most primitive use of Photoshop ever. And my game opens with the credits, because they knew no one in their right mind would finish the game to see who made this.
Those cutscenes aren't bad, but the presentation on Sega Genesis is much worse.
When you start the game, the start menu is actually the options menu. It's a bit clustered. And there's also this bizarre color scheme in the back. Odd choice for this game. Pause menu takes you to your weapons inventory, which again is clustered. This can be confusing for beginners, and the cutscenes are practically non-existent. Kevin says something when he saves the house, and then you have a very short ending followed by the credits. That's it. With barely any effort, Sega definitely has the worst presentation.
No way. Do you want to see how bad my cutscenes are again? I'd rather have no cutscenes.
Sure, the Sega game has confusing menus and practically no cutscenes, but you're gonna sit there and tell me this is better? Seriously? These pictures are bad. It honestly would have been better to have no cutscenes. For just failing horribly with the cutscenes, worst presentation goes to Super Nintendo.
Okay, my game definitely has this. What was that noise? It's that burglar. He's back. Quick, in there. I have an idea. Watch this.
Where the hell did you come from?
Who's there?
I'm gonna cut your head off and stick it on a pig pole!
Not a pig pole. That's my worst fear. Give me that. What are you doing? Don't do it. Give me that.
You, my sun, my moon.
What?
Come to me now. Tonight, let me worship you in my arms.
Hey, you touch me and I'll kill you.
Your touch is worth 100,000 deaths.
I've been denying this way too long.
Stop the beating of my heart.
Give me that. I can do it. Stop. This Home Alone thing is not working. No, it's not. Let's just compare sound.
The music in Super Nintendo is awful. Listen to this way too energetic blues riff. Or this dark post-apocalyptic music. The rest is just bad.
That's nothing compared to the music on Sega Genesis.
There's some boring tunes here. This song is a little too action-packed. pretty forgettable.
Are you even listening? My music is way worse.
You at least have music from the movie. I don't.
The Super Nintendo game opens with the song from the movie. There's even Christmas-related songs here.
Come on, you're telling me you don't have any music from the movie?
Not from my movie.
I have a song from a movie, but it's not Home Alone. Listen to this opening song. Sound familiar? Maybe here's why. Seriously? Sega game opens with weird science?
Well, what about sound effects? My sound effects are terrible. An enemy dying sounds like puking. The sound effects for objects landing sound out of place. And killing a boss is the same sound effect used on the safe. Talk about lazy.
My sound effects are just as bad.
Listen to bouncing on objects. Sledding in this game is like nails on a chalkboard. And this siren makes you want to rip your ears out. Bottom line, even though some songs are bad, the Super Nintendo game has songs from the movie. With forgettable songs and bad sound effects, worst sound goes to Sega Genesis.
The Sega game definitely has worse gameplay.
The main point of the game is to beat the clock. You have to defend as many houses as you can before the police arrive. 20 minutes beginner and 40 an expert. There's a total of 5 houses. If you stop all 5 houses from getting robbed, you get the good ending. If at least one house doesn't get robbed, you get a fair ending. And if all the houses get robbed, then it's game over. To defend each house, you need to inflict pain. If the pain meter fills up, then the burglars leave the house. If the loot meter fills up, then you lose the house. You can hurt enemies by setting traps or attacking them with a weapon. In order to set traps, you need to get to a house before the burglars do. The items you can use can only be set once, and you can never get more. If you use all the items, then you can no longer set traps. That leaves you with weapons. Your main attack is some sort of gun. There are many guns in this game. Using materials from outside or inside the houses, you can make new guns. You don't have life bar or lives, so the only way to lose is to lose all the houses. If the enemy gets you, you just get hung up on the wall for a few seconds.
Doesn't sound so bad.
That's because I haven't talked about the execution.
This game seems interesting, but it's incredibly flawed. Let's start with the controls. This game has some of the worst jumping in a video game ever. It's incredibly stiff. It's so hard to control these jumps. You'll find yourself slipping on your own traps often. And the shooting. Kevin shoots incredibly slow. When you see an enemy, you have such a short window to attack. Most times you'll fire too late and you'll get hung up, wasting time and ammo. And one thing you don't want to do in this game is waste ammo. Once you're out of bullets, you can't defend the house. Then you're just stuck while the loot meter fills up. So many problems in this game make it so frustrating to play.
Well, I still say the Super Nintendo game is worse.
My game plays like a 2D platformer. The object of the game is to get hidden items. You can carry only a certain amount. Then you need to drop the items in a laundry chute. Once you drop all the items, you unlock the basement and fight a boss. You do this 4 times and you beat the game.
That sounds like a nice and simple game.
There's nothing nice about this game.
The controls are horrible here too. The jumping is off. You won't hit your mark often. But that's not even the worst of it. This game is just incredibly boring and tedious. Like I said, you have to find items. So items are in drawers and cabinets, which is fine. Other items just randomly pop out of the air. I'm sorry, not randomly. You need to be holding up in order for an item to appear. And since items can appear out of thin air, you're going to be holding up the entire time you play the game. Holding up for an entire game is not fun. Then you have these boss fights. They're all pretty much the same. You touch a brick on the wall, make it fall on the enemy. You have to use this random brick because you can't use your weapon in the basement. Now you have to perfectly time a brick to fall on an enemy. And there are tons of ridiculous enemies. Okay, I'll allow the spider, but bats? Ghosts? A giant rat? Sure, there's Harry and Marv, but remember this mafia guy? Or this guy? Why are all these people here?
My game has dumb enemies too.
I have Harry and Marv and the spider. I also have a robot that electrocutes you. And a ghost that also electrocutes you for some reason. And a cat?
That's nowhere near as bad as my game.
But my game's overly complicated and frustrating.
But it's still better than my game.
The Sega game plays a lot like the movie. The goal of the game is to defend houses. You can even set up traps, just like the movie. The Super Nintendo game just has you collect items, and you don't set traps at all. That's not like the movie. The Sega game even has depth. This happens when you make your own weapon. Sure, on easy mode, it automatically makes weapons for you. But in expert mode, you put together different combinations and discover lots of new weapons. Not to mention, expert mode has items that don't even exist in easy mode. It motivates you to play the harder mode. The Super Nintendo game has no depth. It just has one boring mode. It's obvious this game was made just to cash in on the Home Alone name. It has barely anything to do with the film. The Sega game at least tried, and while it is flawed, there's more effort put into it. Once you get past the flaws, it can even be an enjoyable game, made for the purpose of simply cashing in. Worst gameplay goes to Super Nintendo.
Both games aren't great, but one is definitely worse. And that game is Home Alone for the Super Nintendo.
It has bad graphics with horrible use of color. It has bad presentation with some of the worst screen captures ever. It has music from the movie, but the rest of the tunes are awful. And the gameplay lacks any innovation or effort. The Sega Genesis game tried. It actually plays like the film. While it is flawed, it's a much better attempt than the Super Nintendo game. The Super Nintendo game was clearly just an effort to cash in on one of the biggest movies of all time. And with that, worst Home Alone game goes to Super Nintendo.
Well, now that that's done, I can finally get back to
What was that noise?
It's the same burglar. He's back again.
Seriously?
Yeah, seriously. And this time I brought my gun.
Why would you rob us 3 times in the same night?
What? I drive a smart car. Not a lot of room for stolen property.
That's an incredibly small car. You know my uncle has one? Buyer's remorse since day one.
That's crazy, because he's such a smart shopper. You don't see him, he's always with the consumer.
Yeah,
Silence. Now that I have my gun, it's time to say goodbye.
It's that scary neighbor who walks around with a shovel. He saved us. I guess he's not such a bad guy.
You really can't judge a book by its cover.
You should stop him. No, I'm good. You can stop him. Okay, I'm just gonna call the cops.
Thanks for checking out our latest video. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe. And thanks to everyone who suggested Home Alone, and keep those other suggestions coming. We will get to them. Also check us out on Facebook and Twitter, behind the scenes stuff. Later.
I'm here to kick ass and throw a brick. And I'm all out of gas. Ugh.